I didn't hear the air conditioning. Good. Cool. Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope your start of a day is great today. I started out really good today. We got rain. We actually had some rain this morning, and it might rain today. And we haven't had any rain. I know they're getting way too much in places like Nashville, but we hadn't had any in a couple of weeks. And this time of year, that can dry us out pretty quickly. Anyway, we got a good show for you today. Can we cut the music? We've got the music still playing. That's the dangers of live TV, the good, the bad, the ugly of it. We try to do it all here at John Martin Talks. But we got a great show for you today. The first part of our show, we're going to talk about a little math problem that the Democrats have. You know, they tell you they believe in science, but they don't seem to believe in science of economics. Joe Biden is proposing a three with a T, $1 trillion tax increase. And we're going to break that down here in just a minute. But at the same time, he's proposing a $4 trillion spending increase. So, you do the math. And then we're going to talk a little bit about San Francisco. Hopefully we have time out there. It is really getting crazy out there about school reopening. And it's got liberals against liberals, Asians against blacks. I mean, it is getting nutso in San Francisco. And that's saying something. When you're saying it is getting increasingly nutty in San Francisco, that is not surprising, but it's crazy. But before we go any further, we always have to mention our sponsors. Our primary sponsor is BDU, Big Daddy Unlimited. And to get to them, links to all of our sponsors, look above the show, no matter when or where you're watching it, and you will see a description of the show, but you'll see links to our sponsor. Click on the one for Big Daddy Unlimited, and you'll get factory direct pricing on guns and ammunition delivered directly to your door. And people are spending their checks, their stimulus checks, they're stimulating the gun stores as much as possible. Well, if you go to Big Daddy Unlimited, you can stretch those dollars even further. So check them out. Not only guns and ammunition, but they literally have over 100,000 other items, including tactical gear, swag, even swag, but they also have survival stuff. Anything that has to do with the Second Amendment, you'll find there. And I call them your Second Amendment headquarters because they are literally defending and expanding on that, your Second Amendment rights on a daily basis, which is one of the reasons why they sponsor shows like ours. Then we have patriotthreads.org, apparel with a purpose. Remember the initials to our show, John Martin Talks, JMT. You get 20% off if you go to patriotthreads.org. What patriotthreads.org is about is not only apparel with a purpose that basically has a patriotic theme, as you might imagine, but they are a total fulfillment center, which means they can design a t-shirt for your event, whether it's a golf tournament, a motorcycle ride, whatever. They can design a shirt to your specifications. Then they will help you with the charity of your choice, distributing profits and everything else. They're a complete center for that. Recoil TV, I never want to forget them. Recoil TV, we're partnered up with them, and they have their own YouTube channel. Of course, we have ours as well. Spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks. But Recoil TV is all about the Second Amendment as well. They even have a magazine publication you can get, but they demonstrate, they have videos on the latest products and how to use them. Check out Recoil TV, and we have our show archived on a daily basis on a channel at Recoil TV, and we are grateful for that. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes, as I like to say, of the show. This first article comes to you from Breitbart, and it's a report, Biden infrastructure plan to spend $4 trillion, with a T, increase taxes by $3 trillion. So, Biden is saying, just like this, I love this meme. He's basically saying, hey, we're going to donate my salary, but I'm going to take pretty much all of yours, because the federal government knows no bounds, right? President Joe Biden's infrastructure plan may include $4 trillion in spending and $3 trillion in increased taxes, according to a report released Monday. Now you do the math. So you're going to talk about spending $4 trillion more dollars, but you're going to increase taxes by $3 trillion. So doesn't that automatically increase the deficit by $1 trillion just right off the top? Now, what that tells me is something that I sadly have known for quite some time, and this is bipartisan. Bipartisan, I always tell you, means Republicans cave, but this is one area where it is bipartisan agreement. The deficits do not matter. Now, if that's news to you, let me say it a little bit quieter. The deficits do not matter. I'm not saying they don't matter. I'm just saying the people we've got in Congress on both sides of the aisle, all the Democrats, let me just say that again, all the Democrats and a good chunk of Republicans, they only give lip service at best to deficits. Even during the Trump era, and this is something I've been consistently critical of President Trump on, he overspent the budget. He broke, in a sense, his promises a couple of times. Now, I realize he was up against it. I understand that. And I don't normally criticize President Trump too much, because there's plenty of that to go around. But I believe that one area, I hadn't said this in a while, but if I say it, of course, as I say, it bears repeating. I think one area that Donald Trump was naive, and there are not many, but there's one area where he was naive when he got elected, being a non-politician going into the Washington swamp. I think he genuinely believed, based on his political experience as a donor class and a businessman, that if once he got past the 2016 election, that he'd be able to find a certain number of Democrats that he could work with. And certainly I think he hoped that the Republicans would get behind him pretty much 100%. Now, we know that that didn't happen. The Democrats became the party of resistance, started trying to impeach the dude before he ever even walked up the steps to get inaugurated. And remember how old Mitch Turtlehead McConnell was bashed when Obama first got elected, saying that his job was to make Obama a one-term president. He was called everything but a child of God for that. But the Democrats didn't even want to give Donald Trump a single term. They wanted to get rid of him twice before his term was and once even after his term was over. So I realized that Donald Trump was up against it, but I believe he thought that the Democrats would work with him and that he could count on the Republicans. We saw that did not happen. But if you want to know how far the Democratic Party that I grew up with has simply gone away, all you have to do is go back to one of the most famous Democrats, kind of the one that shaped my politics at the time, John F. Kennedy, when he was first inaugurated, and his famous words. We're going to play it in just a moment, but I want you to compare what JFK says in his inaugural speech and put that up against the current state of the Democratic Party. Check it out.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
I am sad, ladies and gentlemen, I am sad to report to you that that party right there, the party of JFK that you ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I don't know how else to put it. It's dead. It no longer exists. Now, I know there are Democratic voters out there that still believe in what JFK said, but make no mistake, the people that have taken over your party, the progressive left, there are no moderate Democrats elected to office. really aren't. Even Joe Manchin, when it push comes to shove, I don't trust him a lick. Do you? But there are no moderate Democrats. I told you back when the 2020 field had it seemed like 100 people in it, that no matter who came out of that, I would have never thought it would have been Joe Biden. He'd have been the last one I picked. And apparently the first 3 or 4 primaries, it was the same way. Keep in mind, Joe Biden, man, he limped, literally was on life support going into South Carolina. Nobody thought Joe Biden was going to win. And even after he got the nomination. But I told you that no matter who came out of that Democratic field, they were going to be the most progressive candidate that any major party had put forward since McGovern, and even more so than him. And I think I was proven absolutely right. Take these progressives at their word. Joe Biden warned us, in fairness to him, he warned us that if he was elected, he'd be the most progressive president in history. And I think we should have taken him at his word. Maybe some people did. But the party of JFK is dead. Deficits don't matter. And that's one of the reasons, ladies and gentlemen, why I dropped the Democratic Party like a decade ago. Yeah, I was a Democrat, although the first person I ever voted for president for was Ronald Reagan. So that probably shows you where I was coming from. But I realized that the Democratic Party just had no answers, was bankrupt of any kind of solution. Now, I'm not saying, even then when I switched to the Republican Party, I'm not saying that they are the party that has all the answers either. But there are some people, and it's sometimes a very few, in the Republican Party that at least care about the country, deficits, those types of things. They're few and far between. I think we need to flush them all out and start over, but that's just my opinion. Members of the White House Economic Council reportedly remain worried about the increase in spending. Oh, do you believe that's true? Maybe. The officials worried that the large gap between spending and revenue would widen the deficit by such a large degree that it could risk triggering a spike in interest rates, which could in turn cause federal debt payments to skyrocket, said the people familiar with the matter. Well, if true, to use the Democratic phrase, I love that. That's one of the best things that came out of 2020 from the Democrats. If true, because then you can say anything after that, right? If true, we're screwed. That's probably true. But if true, if there is actually people within the White House economic circle that are worried about deficits, if that is true, let me let you in on a bad little secret here. They're not going to win that debate. There is no way they're going to win that debate because money simply doesn't matter anymore. It's irrelevant. They don't care how much it costs. Let me just tell you something. Try this. It doesn't matter where you live in this country. I guarantee you see this happen. If you have a liberal group of people, where they're like in my area, both our county and the major city, Gainesville City Commission, are just as liberal as they could possibly be. We're going to talk about San Francisco here in a few minutes, but I'll put this group up in Alachua County against the San Francisco liberals anytime, and they can try to figure out which one can turn left the hardest. The only people that turn left more than our local people are NASCAR drivers, because I guess they don't turn right at all, right? But let me just challenge you on this. Find a liberal body, whether it's your school board or whatever. Go in to a meeting and listen. It doesn't matter what they're debating. If they're debating a policy, and just ask them, raise your hand and ask them basically 2 questions. First is, how much is this going to cost? And secondly, who's going to pay for it? Well, the answer to the last question is you. You're definitely going to pay for it. But you ask them how much it costs, who's going to pay for it, and they will look at you like you just landed from a UFO, that you're the Roswell, gray aliens or whatever. Because they're like, man, what kind of question is that? It's totally irrelevant. Because for the progressive left, this is something you need to understand. All they care about is implementation of the policy that they're for. As long as that's right, the rest is irrelevant. What you think about it is irrelevant. How much it costs and who's going to pay for it is just not even on their radar screen. Because the only thing that matters is coming up with the best policy, even if it's a virtue signal policy that pushes forward their ideals, and the rest is irrelevant. That's why I tell you, if you're new to the show, you might not have heard this. Firstly, howdy, how are you? Welcome to it. My main political goal, really my only political goal right now, is to stop the progressive takeover of this country, to stop it, or to at least slow it down, my God. And so I don't care whether you're running for, the outhouse, the doghouse, whatever, or the White House. It may not be fair, but I'm going to judge you based on whether or not you are going to help slow down and hopefully stop the progressive takeover of this country. That is my only real political goal. Obviously my show is about battling ignorance and apathy and educating people as to where we were, where we are now, and where we're going. That's basically what I try to do. Back to this article. The infrastructure plan follows as Biden recently signed the Democrats' partisan $1.9 trillion package. In other words, Republicans didn't vote for it. But here's the thing that bothers me about the 1.9 trillion. Forget the details of it. I mean, the details are what they are. Only about 10%, they say, of that plan has anything to do with coronavirus or COVID-19, period. And that's probably true. But here's the dirty little secret. People like it. People like it because we're addicted to the government tea. We're addicted to government money. And, I hadn't gotten my $1,400. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to send it back if I actually get it. Now, I could, right? If I was true 100% of my principles, I probably should send it back, right? And I'm just going to be honest with you, I'm not. Now, I'll probably end up paying taxes and sending it back to them anyway. That's what I did with my last stimulus. I might go and buy some guns from Big Daddy Unlimited while you get that big discount back to direct price. They deliver even to Hawthorne. But we're addicted to big government, and I can justify keeping it by saying, hey, they're giving it to everybody else. I'm going to take mine. And I'm being honest with you. A lot of people don't want to do that, right? But I'm always going to be straight up with you. We are absolutely addicted to big government. I first really I've known it kind of instinctively for a long time, but I was involved with the early beginnings of the Tea Party. Got kind of recruited by some friends of mine. And I realized that it was absolutely true. And one of the things that saddened me about I wouldn't say the demise, but the fading away or the changing of the Tea Party is that I realized that people really don't care about deficits. Part of it is they simply don't understand it. And we certainly have no leadership in Congress about it and at the White House, especially now. But the reported Biden proposal would serve as one of the largest tax hikes in generation. This runs in contrast to President Donald Trump's administration, which cut taxes with the Tax Cuts and the Jobs Act. Let's talk a little bit about taxes. People say, oh, tax the rich, tax the rich. Now, this right here, let me just show you. This is a real sign back, I believe out in California, back when Biden was last in the White House as vice president. This is the Obama-Biden energy plan. And we seem to be dead on track to reach or exceed that again. Let me tell you, they talk about what did Biden say? Oh, I'm not going to tax anybody over $400,000. And we thought that was individuals. Turns out they admitted that now it's families. So it's individuals at $250,000. And a lot of people say, oh, we'll tax them. But let me just give you the straight shoot on this. When gas prices go up by $1 or $2 a gallon, like they're on the way to doing now, that is a tax on average Americans bigger than probably any income. Because you think about it, if you're a working person and you have to drive back and forth to work, like I drive about an hour to get here and back every day. I burn, when I go on my fishing trips, I calculate all my expenses. And it cost me, prior to Biden, about $50 to drive down there and back in my truck. Now it's probably more like 60. So my cost went up a pretty good percentage. And it's definitely going to go up more. And if they keep raising the price of diesel, the charter boats that I go on, they're going to have to turn around and raise prices too. So contrary to what Biden would tell you, and the Democrats is, they've already raised taxes on you, the middle class. Do you think that if someone is a billionaire, millionaire, I'm not saying they don't feel the pinch, but if gas prices go up $2 a gallon, say from what they were when Trump left office, that's really going to affect them in any way, shape, or form? Not much. But if you're someone making 50 grand a year and gas prices go up by $2 a gallon, it is going to have a dramatic effect on you, because not only is it going to cost you more just to crank your car, but it's going to cost you more to buy a loaf of bread, because all of that is directly impacted. So there has already been a tax increase on the middle class and the working poor right now. Democrats also reportedly disagree over if they should focus on fiscal infrastructure such as roads. Check this out. Democrats, when I first read this morning, I was like, wow, man, are we doomed? I don't know. It says Democrats also reportedly disagree over if they should focus on fiscal infrastructure. Keep in mind, this is supposedly an infrastructure bill. Fiscal infrastructure such as roads and bridges compared to social welfare spending such as child care. Now, I'm not even commenting on whether child care is an appropriate expense or not, but it's not an infrastructure bill. It doesn't help repair the bridges unless one of those children grow up to be an engineer, maybe. But who knows? But infrastructure. So I thought I'd look it up because maybe I'm confused. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing because I'm battling ignorance and apathy. And I admit sometimes I'm ignorant of something. It doesn't happen too often, but occasionally. Ignorance, by the way, just means you don't know something. It doesn't mean you're stupid. I hadn't said this in a while, but as I say, it bears repeating. Here, let me give you a quick definition. If you don't know how to read, then you're ignorant. Doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you don't know something. You're ignorant. You're having ignorance in reading. But if you don't know how to read and you don't care, then you're stupid and you need your sign. There you go. But infrastructure, the basic fiscal and organizational structures and facilities, it says, i.e. buildings, roads, power supplies, needed for the operation of society and enterprise. Sounds about right. But the Democrats see infrastructure totally different. Celinda Lake, a Democratic pollster who worked for Biden's 2020 campaign, said, and I'm going to read what she said, and I have to ask, are we doomed? If what she's saying is true, then we might be. She said, we know that Republicans, and we're talking about an infrastructure, $4 trillion. $4 trillion. We know that Republicans, and particularly blue-collar men, really like the physical building and infrastructure and see that as leading to good-paying jobs for men in particular. A lot of women in construction today, by the way. And women and the Democrat base really respond to what you might call softer. Now, if you're driving an 18-wheeler, do you want to drive up over something called softer? I don't think so. Maybe that's what just crazy. But here's their definition of softer infrastructure: child care, schools and infrastructure, caregiving responsibilities, which have come home very vividly during COVID. Now, I'm all about caregiving. I've told you before that my wife has a home health care agency, and she's a home health care nurse, so we deal with caregiving all the time. But it's not an infrastructure issue like building a bridge or filling out a pothole or repairing a dam before it collapses, or maybe making the airport somewhat more modern. It says here, but it'll be a challenge, this person says, but they have, talking about the Democrats, have a major opportunity here to do both in a way that both helps those constituencies and is majority appealing to them as voters. So if we're going to put $4 trillion and we're going to increase taxes by $3 trillion, which automatically makes a deficit of $1 trillion, even I can do the math on that. And we're talking about infrastructure, but it includes stuff like social welfare programs. I ask the question again, are we doomed? Are we doomed? And we might be. I hate to say it, man. I don't like to live that way. I'm not, I like to think of myself as an optimist. What did President Trump talked about the Republican Party being a perpetual optimism, But here's the thing: have you ever heard this before? The optimist said, the pessimist said it can't get any worse than this, and the optimist said, oh yes, it can. So you never know how things might work. Passing another large spending bill remains a daunting task for Democrats. This is what the article is saying, that passed their coronavirus package on partisan lines through the House and the Senate. So they're saying passing another large spending bill remains a daunting task. If only that were true. If only that were true. I don't believe it's a daunting task at all. It's a daunting task to actually spend within your means. It's not even daunting. It's impossible. Do you know and this is under Republicans and Democrats, even under Donald Trump, let's just call it like it is. We have not had a budget, let alone a balanced budget. I mean, balanced budget, what are you, crazy? We haven't had a regular budget passed in years, decades. And we haven't had a cut in spending in forever. I don't remember the last time we had a budget cut, period. Now, you may say, oh, well, they cut the budget here and there. No, they didn't. Not by any practical standard. Because to me, and maybe I'm just an ignorant old hillbilly, like some people accuse me online. First of all, I might be some of it, but there are no hills. There's some Billies like Billy Bob Bass, my psychic sidekick is. But there's no hills where I live. So, you can call me a lot of things, but hillbilly, I don't think so. There's just no hills. But maybe I don't understand it. But to me, here's something. If I had a business, let's say, and I had a budget last year of $100,000. And this year, things have been better than I thought. So I'm going to budget next year to $120,000. But then I thought about it and said, maybe I don't need to spend that whole $20,000. So I'm going to, instead, I was at $100,000, started to go to 120, but decided maybe I'll just go with 110. In Congress, that's a budget cut. In your, you still raise your budget by $10,000, right? The only thing they've ever cut is the rate of spending increase. So, and that's across the board. So if only that were true, that they would have difficulty. The Senate remains split at 50-50, and Democrats may have to use budgetary reconciliation to pass the large infrastructure spending passage. I'm going to play you a little clip because I'm going to tell you what they're trying to do here. I'm going to play you a clip. This is from Joe Biden's press conference last Thursday. It's a clip where he's talking about the doing away with the filibuster. That's, at least I got to say it because you might not get it from what he says, but he's talking about doing away with the filibuster to pass this federalizing of our elections process. The basically HB-SB1 that I've been telling you, if it becomes law, then we are truly doomed. So check it out. We'll come back.
What I'm worried about is how un-American this whole initiative is. It's sick. It's sick. Deciding in some states that you cannot bring water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. Deciding that you're going to end voting at 5 o'clock when working people are just getting off work. Deciding that there will be no absentee ballots under the most rigid circumstances. It's all designed, and I'm going to spend my time doing three things. One, trying to figure out how to pass the legislation passed by the House, number one. Number two, educating the American public. The Republican voters I know find this despicable. Republican voters, the folks outside this White House. I'm not talking about the elected officials. I'm talking about voters. And so I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle. I mean, this is gigantic, what they're trying to do. And it cannot be sustained. And do everything in my power, along with my friends in the House and the Senate, to keep that from becoming the law.
Is there anything else you can do about it besides passing legislation?
The answer is yes, but I'm not going to lay out a strategy in front of the whole world and you now.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out.
There's so much to unpack there. Let's take a couple minutes to do it. First of all, let me just tell you the flat out lies that he said about what he's talking about is bills that are being passed at the state level, which are constitutional because the legislature is the only body within the Constitution that can pass election law changes at the state level for presidential and federal elections. That's the only entity. That's why there was so much, whether you want to talk about mod, we don't say the F word here. So voter mod, we only say things that rhyme with something like squeal. So if you think there was a lot of squealing and a lot of mod that happened, all of the votes that were cast, especially all these mail-in ballots that were outside, this is what the Texas case, by the way, was all about. There were outside changes made by the state legislatures are unconstitutional and should have been tossed, should have never happened. Now, how that would have impacted the elections, who knows? I could guess which way it would have gone. But let's deal with a few lies. There were so many in there. First of all, let's talk about the water issue. They're talking about the Georgia bill that just passed and got signed. And essentially, what's happening in the states is they are codifying, if you will, the election laws they had before and cleaning up the mess. They're not trying to suppress voters at all. Not trying to suppress any voters whatsoever. That is all a lie right there to start with. They are trying to make sure that only U.S. citizens vote in our federal elections. That's all the states are trying to do. But let's get to this water issue because they making it, they pick on things. Georgia, in their bill, passed a thing about delivering water to people waiting in line to vote. It doesn't prevent people from giving people water in line to vote. It doesn't prevent, like a church group or whatever, civic organizations from doing it, or individuals. All it's designed to do is to prevent the bogus influence on people where they act like they want to give you a bottle of water, may actually do it, but what they're really trying to do is pass to you a voter slate to show you, say, what the Democrats or Republicans, for that matter, want you to vote for, and while you're in the voting line, which is illegal, but they're trying to get around it. That's what this is about, because believe me, if they allow them to happen, they'll be handing out water bottles with the label, vote for such and such. So that's all that's about. Let's talk about the 5 o'clock issue. Joe Biden is making it sound like, and even the Washington Post, I think, called him out on this, that the Georgia bill prevents people from voting after 5 o'clock. It is a flat out lie. They're not talking about that whatsoever. Now, some aspects may talk about early voting and that type of thing, but like voting at the polls, especially on day of election, the way most laws are, they close around 7, 8. It depends on each state's a little bit different. But once the polls are closed, if you're in line, you can still vote. So it's totally bogus nonsense. And as far as the voter ID thing, tell me, the vast majority of American people on multiple polling are for voter ID. They make it sound like if you're a black person, I talked a little bit about this, I think, yesterday, but let's just say it right now. To me, one of the most racist things you could possibly say is that someone in this country, an American citizen, because imagine, that's what we're talking about. That's the only people that should be voting in our federal election. Are you telling me that a person based on skin color cannot get an ID? Really? I mean, they're places like out in Oakland are getting ready to give money, direct payments, guaranteed income to people of color. They're excluding whites. You don't tell me they're not going to require an ID to give out that money? I guarantee you they will. Do you think I can walk up there and go, well, I thought, like some kind of bad Dave Chappelle episode and say, well, I thought I was black, man. I'm identifying as black. They're going to check my ID and go, oh, you Caucasian, you ain't getting the money. I mean, give me a break, man. To really say, to insinuate that someone cannot get an ID based on their skin color is not only asinine, it's racist. You're telling me I refuse to believe that. And if true, I'll use the Democratic thing. If it's true that there are groups of American citizens that for whatever reason cannot get a voter ID. Why don't we put forward a plan to help them get that voter ID? I could actually support that because I do believe every American citizen has a right to identify who they are. And so if it's true that there are people based on whatever, skin color, I don't care, that can't get an ID for whatever reason, I'm actually in favor of programs to help them get that. But it's just not true. It's another one of those things that's just simply not true. I yammered on so long that my notes went past me. I guess that's when Billy Bob tries to get me. He's my psychic sidekick trying to get me straight. But back to these Jim Crow things. So Biden talks about Jim Crow, Jim Crow, Jim Crow. And then he says he's not ready to lay out a strategy. First of all, how would you think President Trump could get away with saying that? I'm not going to answer that question. Basically is what Biden says, right? But let me lay out the strategy for you because they absolutely have one. Uncle Sam, man, I put this up there because, we need you. We need you to help us with this and help us with the show. But I'll get back to that in a minute. Let me lay out this strategy for you. Here's what they're trying to do. Now, they're going to propose some gun changes. They're going to propose various different things that are going to come up against the filibuster. And they're not really caring about that. In fact, the Democrats welcome those things getting defeated because what they're trying to do is set up a situation where they can play the ultimate card, the race card. That's why they're saying Jim Crow and everything else. Because what they want to do, they believe, just like Hillary Clinton said, this SB1, this federalizing our election, is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and they don't want to let it pass. So what they're trying to do is set up a situation where, they try to pass, quote, reasonable gun laws and various things, and they run up against the filibuster. And then they're going to bring forward this election bill. And they're going to say that if you don't pass this, then you're a racist. And the only way to help get past this racism is to do away with the filibuster, even though the Democrats have used it tons of times. But it's racist to use. So they're going to try to destroy the filibuster in conjunction with passing this federalization of our election laws. And if that actually does happen and becomes the law of the land, and the God help us, the Supreme Court doesn't do the right thing, then we probably are doomed. That's why I'm here battling ignorance and apathy on a daily basis. But here's the thing about the show you Uncle Sam picture again. I'm going to say just like Biden. Biden in his speech the other day said, I need you, talking about the American people. Well, I need you. I need you, our listeners. I need people to help us, support our sponsors. Help us by sharing the show far and wide. Because make no mistake, we are under attack. Conservative free speech is under attack. And the only way we continue to get this word out is to, like one of my listeners put on there, share this. We've got to get the word out. So I'm depending on you. So I need you, like Joe Biden. But make no mistake, that is their strategy for getting this once in a lifetime as Hillary Clinton. And I take these progressives at their word. All right, Mitch, up time. We got a few minutes left. I want to get into this next story. And it is out of San Francisco. It is a New York Times publication. The San Francisco area has been shut down, as most of California's school system, except with a few exceptions that we'll talk about, for over a year now. In San Francisco, turmoil over reopening schools turns a city against itself. Now, these are people protesting out there in San Francisco. The pandemic has brought grinding frustrations for parents, educators, and students across the board, across the country, I'm saying. But perhaps no place has matched San Francisco. Of course, here in Florida, thanks to our leadership with Governor Ron DeSantis, we've been open all year, both public and private schools, which is a big deal, as you'll see. So it's a level of infighting, public outrage, and halting efforts to reopen schools. Well, would you expect anything less than lunacy in San Francisco? I mean, keep in mind, San Francisco actually has an official poop map. Now, we did a story about this over a year ago. San Francisco actually has, and here's a copy of it, an official map to warn you about areas that you're liable to come across stepping in human feces. A poop map. And look at it. It's really more right down in the downtown area. And they also have a needle problem there, right? So they got syringes and poop and rats. I mean, San Francisco is getting to be a nasty place, man. They actually, I tried to get an image of it, but it gives a whole definition to like a poop cake. I say, maybe on the street, you get a big pile of crap and stick a bunch of needles out of it like candles, and here's your poop map cake. San Francisco, man. Would you expect anything less? And they also have a poop patrol, by the way. I'm serious about this. San Francisco actually has a poop patrol, a group of city employees that are dedicated simply to go around and clean up excessive poop. Now, wouldn't you like to have that job? In February, the city sued its own school system, which has been entirely remote for a year, and the Board of Education, charging they were violating state law by not resuming in-person instruction. Well, here's a radical idea for you. And let me just tell you before I say this. I grew up with school teachers on both sides of my family. My mother was a school teacher. Her mother and father were school teachers. My grandfather on her side of the family was the first person he kept a diary about all this, the first person to ever go to college from his county, Randolph County, Alabama. It's up in the northwest part of the state. The first person, imagine that, in his entire county to go to, he ran track at University of Alabama. The whole area turned out to send him off. And on my father's side, my aunt, all these people are dead and gone now. My aunt Anime, she held at the time she retired the state record in Florida for teaching. She taught 51 years in the public schools. 51 years. 43 in a little place called Trenton over near the Swanee River, and 48 right there in Hawthorne. She taught multiple generations of my family, my own aunt. So I come from a long line of school teachers. I say all that to say that I never thought I would say what I'm about to say. Maybe it is time to do away with public education, to simply do away with it. Maybe we just need to get rid of it and go to some types of private schools, school choice, school vouchers, those types of things. I take my granddaughter and my grandson quite regularly, goes there, to a little school called The Rock, which is a Christian school. And I can tell you that when you literally walk on that campus, you feel the love. And my granddaughter's black. There are a lot of mixed, they're Asian, every kind of walk of life at this school. They have scholarship plans, all kind of stuff. But the love you feel there at that campus is just amazing. So I'm just saying, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time because, and I can tell you this, if you're living in an inner city and you're a minority, they don't care about you. Do you really believe the Democrats and the teachers unions give a hoot about you at all? I mean, what was their response out in Chicago when they talked about reopening schools? The teachers did some kind of spiritual dance thing. Did you see that? Maybe I'll play it another day. But they did this video they put out. It's ridiculous. While kids are literally just getting no education whatsoever. The school system we have now is totally about indoctrination, and I'll make another point of that in just a minute. Soon after, two parents infuriated, back to this article about San Francisco, infuriated by the school board's decision to rename 44 schools. We did a story about that a couple of months ago. Even as it kept them closed, launched a drive to recall 3 of the board members, some 9,000 people. This is in liberal San Francisco. People have joined the campaign mailing list, and they're expected to be collecting signatures soon. So, well, let me just tell you, renaming schools, and there may be some exceptions, but if you go back and look at the San Francisco, I can't get too deep into it now. I did a show on it. Check out our podcast. Best way to do that is go to John Martin Talks YouTube channel. Check it out. You can also, by the way, go to America's Voice News. We don't have a live show on there right now, but America's Voice News is an excellent alternative to the mainstream media. They have a streaming service on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV. You can download free apps on your Android or your iPhone. They're on channel 219 Dish Network and the Pluto Network. But go on their streaming service, look under their shows tab, click on that, and search for us. You'll find John Martin Talks on there. And so that's a good place to archive it. But the renaming of schools is idiotic. It's anti-educational. Now, am I saying there aren't some schools named after some people like John Bedford Forrest, who was a Democrat, by the way, and founder of the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, there may be some exceptions, but even that can be educational. Why not at least talk? Why not have in every school named after someone, have a little class discussion about why the school was named after that person and what it means going forward and what can we learn. I'm all for teaching our true history. I want us to teach the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I'm telling you, our public schools have become, and I know there's exceptions, they're great public schools, but in general, especially the way the teachers union is going and the Democratic Party, they want them to be indoctrination centers, pure and simple. The critics of the board unearthed 4-year-old tweets written by the board's vice president in which she accused Asian Americans of sidling up to white Americans to get ahead. If you're these anti-Asia, right? Stop Asian hate. Accused Asian Americans of sidling up to white Americans to get ahead without confronting racism, comparing them to slaves who benefited from working inside a slave owner's house. So if you're Asian American, this is a black woman, by the way, that tweeted this. More than a third of the district students are Asian Americans. Asian American hate. You know where the greatest amount of Asian American hate is? It is in the Ivy League. Harvard, Princeton, and all those schools. They actually are prejudiced against Asian people. Because Asian people, for whatever reason, I would like to think it doesn't have anything to do with biology, but it might. There may be differences in us based on that. But it's primarily by parenting. Asian parents, by and large, especially, people from like Japan and China, Korea, you name it, they're very tight, family knit people, and education is something they pride themselves on. But Asian Americans, especially Chinese Americans, or even Chinese, not necessarily Americans, do you know that Harvard has specifically excluded them from getting in there specifically because they are Asians? So if there's Asian hate going on, why don't they boycott the Ivy League instead of worrying about what happened in some different places here? The Ivy League is where I would start if I were going to protest against Asian hate. Back to this article. Amid the chaos, one thing has remained clear. A large share of the city, talking about San Francisco's public school students, are unlikely to see the inside of their classrooms this academic year. So they're bickering back and forth. They're calling it chaos, right? It's chaotic. And it reminded me of, when I think of chaos, I think of get smart. So why don't they come back with the cone of silence deal? Maybe they could talk to each other through that. But I got to think, Billy Bob tells me when I first proposed this, he said, man, that ain't going to work in San Francisco. I'm like, why? He said, because they're going to make some kind of deviant thing out of that. There'll probably be some gerbils going back and forth. Is that too deep, too much? Because, me, when it comes to these kind of things, let me just tell you flat out, I hadn't said this. When it comes to all these issues about who you're sleeping with, what your alphabet name is and all that, I really don't care. I got a real simple policy. Now, kids is another story, but I got a simple policy. Open mind, closed behind. That's just the way I am. I don't care what you do with your cone of silence or anything out there. But I can tell you, the fact that San Francisco is getting nutty is not news in itself. All right, well, we're pretty much out of time. I just wanted to say this about what's happening in San Francisco. Shame on what you've done to that city. Because San Francisco went from being the jewel of the United States, maybe the greatest city on the planet, to becoming the stool. Only these progressive Democrats could do that. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please go directly to our Facebook and our YouTube sites. Like them, share them with others. Share this message far and wide. Support our sponsors. I'll pray for your family. You pray for mine. Let's all pray for this beloved United States of America. Man, she needs it and deserves it more than ever. But above all else, like I say each and every day, from my heart, from my family to yours, have a blessed day.